There's also some literature suggesting that certain types of instruments, musical instruments, or vocal training like singers do, may help with apnea. But again, the data on this is very anecdotal. It's, a little bit here, a little bit there. The didgeridoo is very interesting because it, again, stimulated me to start thinking about why would it work if it works. And it turns out that when you read about the didgeridoo, the reason it's different from all other instruments is it's a very kind of interesting way you play it. The didgeridoo is basically just a hollow pipe. They take a tree trunk and the termites hollow it out. But you can get a PVC tube at Home Depot and use it and play just as nice. The way you make noise into it is you blow a raspberry into it. Okay, so and it amplifies it, and it makes this sort of haunting sound that you hear in all Australian movies. If you go see Crocodile Dundee, there's didgeridoo music all throughout the background. Probably that has nothing to do with it, but the tradition playing the didgeridoo is you play it the way the Scots play a bagpipe. And so what they do is they play a continuous tone that goes on for hours without breaking for breathing. And how do they do that? There's a technique, which is the first thing you have to learn when you play this instrument, called circular breathing. Circular breathing means that you use your cheeks as a reservoir, exactly like bagpipes, have a bag. So the person playing bagpipes, if you've watched them, he blows into the bag continuously, but his blowing has nothing to do with the playing. It's just refilling the bag. And then he uses his arm pressure on the bag to put music out through the, if you call it that, through the pipes, okay? Well, the didgeridoo is played the same way, except you use a bag that's made of your cheeks. And so what you do is you pump up your cheeks, and then you take breaks from that, and you collapse the cheeks to keep the air flowing out your mouth while you breathe in. So you breathe in through your nose while you're actually breathing out through your mouth by pumping your cheeks. And in order to accomplish that, you have to motivate the back of your throat into a valve. You have to move it in funny ways. And guess what? The muscles you use are exactly the muscles that affect the area of sleep apnea. And so, in a sense, if you have to come up with an explanation, my explanation is you're training the right muscles. Now, I don't know if it's the only way, and in fact, our hope was that if we could prove this, we could start circular breathing classes, which I can do without disturbing your neighbors, because the didgeridoo is a pretty awful sound when you're learning, pretty awful sometimes after you've learned. So I don't know if that's the answer. We've tried for a couple of years now to go further with this. I don't know. I just... Yeah. If it works, I'm all for it. But I will urge you, please, if you think it works, do subject yourself to a formal test with a sleep study, because there's a lot of treatments out there that people say works, and it's mostly because they're so invested in it, and they don't work when you test them. So you do need to do that. Yeah.
Are you saying this instrument will, by the way, they have this at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, they have some type of, they have a lot of it.
Yeah, the didges are very, very nicely.
Are you saying learning to use this could wean you off?
Yeah, it did in a few patients there, and again,
what does it do that's permanent?
Well, the idea is that it trains your muscles. Now, the problem, of course, is it'll only continue working as long as you do it. It's like running a marathon. You get nice and strong, but if you stop training, it stops working. So it's not a cure in that sense, but it's an alternative treatment. And again, very much like you suggested yoga might do, it's a way of training the right muscle. Non-specific training, I'm not very optimistic about. So just getting stronger in your throat. In fact, the people who have the strongest necks and throats, the right area, are wrestlers and sumo wrestlers and people who do weightlifting and bodybuilding. They have terrible apnea because actually they build up the wrong muscles and make it worse. So it's not as simple as just any training. The right training, by all means. Yeah, I think you had a question, yeah.
I just wanted to ask, you started off by saying that CPAP works. That's it. It works. And it's not natural. It's horrible to think about it. Jokes are made. A Sopranos episode had Uncle Junior wearing it. Yeah. He was asked how many bombers he shot down and all of this. You sound like a very out-of-the-box guy. Why aren't the best minds all the way around just thrown into this? We have the evidence of the health issues and what not sleeping. And when you spend half your time sleeping in your life, why? Now we've got didgeridoo classes. We have to be sign up for this. I mean, CPAP works. Why aren't the studies done to nail it? And why aren't why is the equipment just done to nail it? I mean, it seems like we're taking stabs, or the community at large are taking stabs at something that's very serious to every aspect of your life.
Well, the answer to your question is, that's a great question, and it's your charge to try and motivate the people you know to put more energy and money into this. But the bottom line is, be realistic. There are a lot of things like that that need a big effort. We need to cure alcoholism, we need to cure drugs, we need to cure poverty, we need to cure war. You know, there's a lot of things that we need to do and we aren't doing, and curing sleep apnea and the need for CPAP is perhaps in the list, but it may not be the only one. So that's part of the reason, and I will tell you, just to give you an idea of the economics behind this. When CPAP first came out, Colin Sullivan tells the story about his first patient. They had this idea. It was purely a research idea. It was kind of a harebrained idea. They had this truck driver who had 2 car accidents, had very severe sleep apnea, and categorically refused tracheostomy, which is this operation to put a hole in the throat. So they figured they'd try this out just to get some interesting measurements. And they put him on the lab, and 2 hours into the study, Colin started writing his paper. He said he'd never done that before. 2 hours into the first patient, he knew he had it. He'd nailed it, okay? And the next morning, the patient refused to go home unless they figured out a way to, because what it was a vacuum cleaner turned backwards, and the mask consisted of a dribbled-on glue attaching 2 nose prongs into the guy's nose in a kind of a semi-permanent way that had to be dissolved in the morning. The guy wouldn't go home without it. And he was treated with that, you know, for a while before. Well, the point I'm trying to make is he got involved. I got involved very shortly after that with my first patient, who I happen to have seen yesterday, now 30 years later, still on CPAP. And we all had these incredibly gadgety, hopeless Scotch tape and baling wire things, and we tried to get a company to make it. We said, you know, we can't keep doing this. Nobody, and everybody we told about it said, that's really interesting science, but nobody's going to wear that thing, and there's no money in it. We'll never sell it. Okay? That's what the companies all said. We went to companies, we begged, we pleaded, we said, and they said, no way, there's no money in it. You know, it's too easy to copy, nobody will buy it, there's no patients out there. Well, then the studies started coming out from Wisconsin and from the Sleep Heart Health and some other places, not only about the fact that there's a lot of apnea. We're now estimating that 20% of the population may have mild forms of apnea, and certainly 5 or 6% have pretty severe apnea. That's a lot of people. That's more than diabetes, which we all know about. That's, you know, approaching numbers many times more than lung cancer or breast cancer. I mean, we're talking huge numbers of people who are affected. Well, the companies aren't stupid, so they put money into making CPAP because of that. And the other companies that make alternate treatments, the dental devices, the surgical approaches, the pacing devices, they all said, you know, there's a patient population, we can make money, or at least not lose money, by doing this. And I don't mean to suggest it's all money, but the point is, where there's a need, people invest. And that's happening. But the problem is, you know, there's a cost-benefit ratio. To spend a huge amount of money because something's good doesn't motivate many people, except perhaps Bill Gates now. It didn't motivate him in the beginning.